Now, when it comes to this election, there is one state just seems to be going back and forth a lot. Yes, Pennsylvania does and others, but North Carolina also seems to be one of those. In the last election, North Carolina was very, very close, and we expect that in this election. And in this video, we're going to talk about North Carolina, how Democrats can win North Carolina, and we're going to be focusing primarily on media markets because there are 10 media markets in the entire state, which means unlike, let's say, Georgia, where you do have a number of media markets, but you can really pound and hit the Atlanta media market. The problem with North Carolina are the media markets are spread out, so therefore it becomes much, much harder to actually target in North Carolina. So we're going to be talking about that today, but let's first go and look at the electoral history that we have at North Carolina and see how it aligns as far as helping Democrats or Republicans. So if we look at the presidential races, we can see back in 2004, North Carolina was a significant Republican state. But since then, 2008, when Barack Obama won the state, it has been pretty close. Even in 2016, when Hillary Clinton had a bad campaign nationwide, she only lost North Carolina by 4%. So all in all, this state has been quite competitive when it comes to the presidential level in recent years. Now, when it comes to the gubernatorial elections, this is where it gets a little bit different. If we look at these last 5 elections, Democrats have won 4 out of the last 5. Now, 2016, with Roy Cooper running for the first time, was in very, very close race, but of course, Roy Cooper won. But as you can see in 2004, 2008, and then Roy Cooper running for re-election in 2020, the Democrats performed quite well, whereas in 2012, they actually got killed. So we are talking about these big swings, these big margins when it comes to the gubernatorial race that we can't really replicate when we look at the presidential race. And we're starting to see that trend this year in the 2024 gubernatorial race in North Carolina as well. Now, when we look at state Senate races in the state, this is where it becomes a little bit harder because a lot of North Carolina congressional, state house, and state Senate races are gerrymandered to hell. And a lot of times these have to go to court and be rewritten again. But we look at the state Senate over time, we do see from 2014 to 2022 that the Democrats have increased by 4 seats overall. So there is an upward trajectory. Granted, it's not as good as it was in 2020, but it is still better than it was in 2014. So we are seeing a slight gradual increase for Democrats in the state Senate. As far as the state house in 2018, this was the golden year, I guess, for the Democrats when it came to the state house. But if we look at the other years, it's pretty stagnant. But still, compared to 2014, the Democrats are doing slightly better. So again, we are seeing the slightest of movements in the Democratic direction in the state house as well. As I mentioned earlier, in this video, we are going to be talking about the media markets. And the reason why is because they're just so spread throughout the state. And some of them are pretty big and significant. And you will see that as we go through each media market. Now, we're not going to go through all of the media markets because you have a lot of media markets in different states that creep into North Carolina and just really capture an insignificant amount of the vote. That's not the discussion in this video. So for example, there's one county in North Carolina that's technically in the Atlanta media market. We're not going to examine the whole entire Atlanta media market because it's not going to impact that one county. It's a smaller county all the way out to the west of North Carolina. So we're not going to talk about these ones where an overwhelming majority of the media market is in another state. But let's go ahead and start with the biggest one, Charlotte. All right, so let's go ahead and look at the Charlotte media market. And as you can see here, it is ranked the 21st largest media market in the United States. So put that in perspective, Las Vegas, which is a pretty decent media market, is number 40. So this market is significantly bigger. As far as the total number of registered voters, we have slightly over 2 million. And between 2000 and 2020, as we can see the election results on the right, the Democrats have seen a gain in presidential election results of 6.8%. So we can see how George Bush had nearly 60% in 2000, whereas in 2020, Donald Trump was down to 52%, with the Democrats competing and possibly in the next few cycles taking the lead in this area. Now, if we look at the voter registration numbers, we can see that Democrats and Republicans are somewhat close, with the Republicans a little bit ahead, but we see that unaffiliated and minor party voters are the plurality of voters in this media market. So when we also talk about these media markets, we have to talk about persuasion tactics as well. There are 3 main ones, and in media markets in North Carolina might have different persuasion strategy. So let's go ahead and look at these. The first one is just a pure partisan persuasion. You're trying to take somebody who would vote Republican or maybe is an independent that might even vote for a smaller third-party candidate, and you're trying to get them to vote for the Democrats. So that is a partisan persuasion. The second persuasion you have is just turnout persuasion, right? You might have a Democratic voter who is just going to sit at home and not vote, but you need to persuade them to actually go out and vote. So that's turnout persuasion. And then the last one is actually dissuasion, where you're trying to suppress the turnout of another party. The Republicans did this really well back in 2016 by questioning Hillary's emails, this, that, and the other, and tried to suppress votes for her, causing low turnout amongst her voters. Now, in Charlotte, in this area, we can see that the core of this media market, Mecklenburg and Charlotte, are just like what we see in Cincinnati, where we have a strong urban core, and some of the close suburbs around the urban core are more Democratic. But as you get out of that, it almost turns very, very Republican. Now, in both Cincinnati and in Charlotte, we are starting to see those margins chip away. And if you're looking at campaign strategy and campaign persuasion, you really are looking to try to get Republicans to vote Democratic, which is more of a challenge than, let's say, trying to get Democrats to turn out for the vote. So in this situation with Charlotte, the way that the Democrats can win is obviously really turn out Charlotte and Mecklenburg County, but then try to just chip away at some of the suburbs in and around the city of Charlotte. Okay, so let's go to the next media market, which is Raleigh-Durham. So as you can see here, Raleigh-Durham is the 22nd largest media market, just basically the same size as Charlotte. So it is significantly larger than many media markets in the United States. As you can see, total registered voters is also over 2 million voters, but this is where the Democrats have had their biggest gains over the last 20 years. So as you can see, Gore slightly lost this media market, 49.2 to 50.1 against George Bush. But then you can see Biden is pushing 60% almost. He is now at 58.3. And if you look at the voter registration, unaffiliated and other voters are number one, but the Republicans are significantly behind in third place at a little bit over 500,000. Democrats are almost at 900,000. So talking about campaign strategies and persuasion, this is a place where you just want to focus on turnout. You have the numbers, they are in your favor, and this is a pure turnout area. There isn't much persuasion to be done as far as having Republicans go to the Democratic side, because we're already seeing those trends happen naturally, and that's probably just through the changing of the population or whatnot. So for the Democrats to continue and build on what they have in North Carolina, this is a pure turnout persuasion area. Okay, let's go ahead and go to the next media market. So next media market is Greensboro-Winston-Salem and High Point. As you can see, it is the 45th largest market in the United States. Going back to what I was saying about Las Vegas being 40th, this is just slightly behind. So you can see already we have 3 large media markets in the state of North Carolina, which really means you have to spread your money out throughout the state. Now, as you can see, there's a little bit over 1 million registered voters, but the Democrats have gained not as much, but 4.1% over the last 20 years in presidential elections. So you can see Al Gore had 39.2%, whereas Joe Biden had 43.3%. So we do see a slight shift. Now, as far as registered voters, Democrats are last at 389,000 voters as far as voter registration. Unaffiliated voters are slightly over Republicans right now, with Republicans being very close at 469,511. Now, this is kind of a tricky area because you can make an argument for both of the campaign strategies. You can say, listen, obviously it's trending in the Democratic way, so we really need to work on getting those Democratic voters out. We really need to work on persuading people to turn out the vote. However, it is still so close here and Democrats are behind that you really need to work on partisan persuasion tactics in this area. This is an area that I truly believe is going to be the make or break area for the Democrats in this election. If they are able to shift this needle just 2 or 3% more in their favor, which will be hard, but if they can do that and increase their turnout, this region alone, the Greensboro-Winston-Salem area, is going to be the area that gives the Democrats the win. This is the main battleground to me when it comes to North Carolina. Now let's go ahead and go over to Asheville, just a little bit further west. Now we're at the Asheville media market. Now most of this media market is in South Carolina, in Spartanburg and in Greenville. So chances are the media of the Democratic media machine is probably not going to spend any money in this media market, because it would mostly go to South Carolina and voters who are not going to be persuaded and are probably already voting Republican anyway. So it's things like social media advertisement, YouTube advertisement, and so on that's going to have much more of an impact here because it can be geographically targeted. So the fact that it's a 36th largest market means it's an expensive market, but it also means that an overwhelming majority of that market is going to be in South Carolina. But when looking at just the North Carolina part, we see that about 600,000 voters are here, and the Democrats have increased 4.2% over that time. Now, a lot of that increase has primarily been in the city of Asheville itself, becoming a liberal bastion in Appalachia. Now, if we look at registered voters, we see the Republicans are slightly ahead of the Democrats, but we can see unaffiliated and other minor party voters are significantly up. And if we look at Gore back in 2000, we see that he won only 39.7% of the votes, but now we have Biden at 43.9%. Now, this is where it becomes a little bit difficult for Democrats. So you're not going to want to spend a lot of money in this region, and you're really just looking at turning out the votes in Asheville. Now, luckily for Democrats, the voters that are there are very high turnout voters, very kind of more affluent, white, liberal, woke type of voters, and they're the ones that are probably going to go out and vote in higher turnout rates than many of the other groups that we talk about. So there isn't much that needs to be done here, except the city of Asheville just needs to turn out, because just a few thousand votes in Asheville, as far as turnout rates are concerned, could be what determines if this state goes for Harris or if this state goes for Donald Trump. It really can come down to this one. So we're coming to our last media market that we're talking about, and that is the Greenville-New Bern media market. As you can see, it ranks 102 in the United States, so significantly lower than what we just saw at Asheville. But as you can see, it has nearly the same amount of voters compared to Asheville. Now, remember I mentioned Asheville was mostly that media market in South Carolina, so only a fraction of it was in Asheville itself. And as you can see, as far as Democratic gain or loss, there has been no Democratic gain or loss. So Al Gore had 42% back in 2000. Biden had 41.9%. If you round those off kind of a little bit, it basically comes to a 0% gain. Now, what's really interesting is the breakdown of current registered voters. As you can see, unaffiliated voters are number one. Republicans are number two, but the Democrats aren't that far behind, which shows that possibly there is some room for movement in this part of the state. Because if you have that many registered Democrats, especially at a time where the Dixiecrats being registered as Democrats is no longer as much of a thing anymore, it's still there, but not as much of a thing, this does seem like a place where the Democrats can possibly have a little bit of a gain here. Now, I have to say with those registration numbers, even though registration doesn't always equate to vote choice, that it is a little bit disappointing that these numbers are significantly lower for the Democrats and that they haven't really moved over the last 20 years. And in this situation, what do? You have almost kind of like this other dynamic where you have to persuade Democratic voters to not maybe just vote for the Democrat, but also turn out the vote as well. So this creates another dynamic. But this is also a place where Democrats, if they do well in this election, this might be a place where we see the needle move slightly. So even though it's the lower of the media markets that we've talked about, it's also possibly one of the most significant when it comes to just having that little bit of a margin to end up winning the presidential race. So as you can see with North Carolina, it's not like the other states. The Democrats have all these different media markets. They're all equally decently sized. They all have different voters. They all have different persuasions, though in the bigger media markets, we are seeing the Democrats do significantly better, which is the reason why the state is significantly closer now than it was back in 2004 when George Bush won it by a pretty hefty 12-point margin. So we are seeing some shifts, but the main reason I wanted to break this down in this way is to just show the complexity when we're talking about North Carolina. It's not like Georgia, where we can just put all our money in Atlanta, get those suburbs, win the state, or even Pennsylvania, where you have two geographical centers, right? Or, as I mentioned, Nevada, Arizona, where you just have Phoenix and Las Vegas. This requires a lot of coordination, a lot of spreading of the volunteers, a lot of spreading of money, and a lot of coordination amongst all aspects of the state. It is an extremely spread out state that makes it difficult. And as you saw the ratings of those media markets, it's not a cheap state to run media in, because you can't just say, yes, Atlanta is a high one, but you can put all our eggs in the Atlanta basket. No, you just can't do that in North Carolina. So this is where it becomes a lot more difficult. And this is where having a good organized campaign structure, as far as the top level that knows how to allocate resources, this is where it's very important. And I truly believe, looking at the gubernatorial race and just how the RNC has become more of instrument for the dear leader Donald Trump instead of being an actual campaign machine, I think this gives Democrats a little bit of an advantage. But I wanted to just go over North Carolina a little bit today so you can kind of see the media markets and see where things are, and to get an idea of the lay of the land, because when it does come to North Carolina, it's just really hard to say cut and dry, like Georgia, win Atlanta, win the Atlanta suburbs, win the state. You just can't say that in North Carolina. So thank you all very much. Make sure to subscribe, like this video, comment below. Have a wonderful day wherever it is you are, and I'll see you in the next video.